So the first problem that I see is that we are misdefining the problem. We enter into this false dichotomy about justice, and we end up saying things like this. Justice is for liberals. We need to focus on just preaching the gospel. Justice is part of cultural Marxism. I see these kinds of statements all the time on social media. And I think that this is part of misdefining the problem. We have for some reason, distanced ourselves from justice. And so I read well-meaning conservatives say things like this a lot. In fact, it often looks like this comment that I'm going to address later in the cast. But this was made by a conservative person. It says, I never understood progressives' idea of Jesus and social justice. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. How do they circle around that? And there's just kind of this attitude on the part of many conservatives that justice is not a conversation that's worth having, that somehow it's not biblical, it's not something we ought to be doing. And I think that misdefines the issue. It really misses the point. But on the other side of the conversation is our well-meaning Christian friends who will just keep quoting Micah 6:8. They just keep quoting it over and over again. Do justice, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly, as if this is in totality a summary of our faith. No, this is just the law. This is our humble obedience, our response to the gospel. But there is more to our faith than just this. And it gets painted into almost this religion of works, where we're just always working to do justice. And we read things like this on social media from Union Seminary. It says, social justice is not extra. Social justice is the gospel. And this, again, it misdefines the problem. And that leads us really into the next issue right away, which is misdefining the standard. Because when I'm talking to somebody, I can quickly realize that they do not have a firm grip on the difference between the gospel and justice when they misdefine the standard for justice itself, especially when how they talk about what justice is sounds nearly the same as what the world is telling me about justice. So here's a little of what that looks like. Social justice says things like this. It talks about economic justice. And usually this is about redistribution of resources. It talks about things like reproductive justice, which is a euphemism for abortion as a human right. In fact, there's a lot of conversation right now about how do we bring abortion to Africa. We did a whole podcast on that a couple of years ago. We're hearing a lot in our culture right now about a marriage equality as a justice issue. Gay marriage is an issue of equal rights. Gender justice, affirming someone's preferred pronouns, advocating for trans women to participate in women's sports. These are all things that are flying under the banner of social justice right now from a cultural point of view. Now, when we get to the Bible, we read, for example, in Romans chapter 13, we read this: let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. Notice the close connection between love and law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you should not murder, you should not steal, you should not covet, and whatever other command there may be. Again, notice the connection between love, law, and command. These are all very closely affiliated. They're all kind of in the same bucket. In other words, whatever other commands, whatever laws there might be, in addition to the short list, they are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. So we do not have the freedom to redefine love. Love and law is the explanation of God's definition of love. Okay, so yes, love is patient and kind and keeps no record of wrongs and all of those things. But all of those things that we read about in 1 Corinthians 13 are rooted and grounded and expressed in the transcultural principles of the moral law that we read throughout the scripture. So when we think about social justice and what our culture is telling us justice is, and we look at the other side of the ledger about biblical justice, we see things like this. The Bible tells me how we love. Well, if I'm thinking about economic justice, well, we were told last summer, looting is just really an expression of people who are in pain. Well, from the Bible's perspective, looting breaks God's law regarding stealing and private property. The culture wants me to advocate for reproductive justice. The problem is the Bible defines how I love my neighbor, and part of the neighbor that is the most vulnerable to me is the unborn. An abortion violates God's law against murder. Marriage equality says I should advocate for gay marriage, but the Bible defines love as being marriages between one man and one woman. Social justice tells me about trans justice. Biblical justice says that the way that I love is that I am understanding that humans are created either male or female. So if we're not careful in our definitions of justice, according to the Bible, defining how I love my neighbor according to the Bible, I can very easily just slip right into the stream of the culture that's telling me how to love my neighbor. And then I will end up advocating for things that actually violate God's law.